So I'm back with Matthew Smith. Matthew, having reflected on the events of the Magna Carta anniversary year, I wonder whether you could tell me about the legacy, the long-term legacy of the anniversary.
So I think it would be fair to say that the legacy of those events in 2015 is mixed. So on the one hand, there is no permanent Magna Carta visitor centre at Runnymede, as some had hoped, nor were Surrey County Council's visions of Magna Carta country really realised, apart from some very, very minor tweaks to the signage as you drive into Runnymede. There's no real manifestation of that. It certainly hasn't become the type of heritage destination as was envisaged in the lead up to the anniversary. But there have been some other forms of legacy from 2015. So if we look at Egger Museum, for example, from their programme of activity in the lead up to and during the anniversary year, we've seen quite a surprising legacy in the form of a rejuvenated local museum on a much more institutionally resilient, sustainable footing. So that injection of lottery money really provided for a sea change in the institution in terms of having the credibility and the track record, and through developing community partnerships, to then reach out and do many more of those types of projects in the year since the Magna Carta celebrations. So that has been locally one of the most important legacies of Magna Carta, and one of its real success stories, that it took a really struggling small local museum, which was barely reaching the kind of minimums of museum accreditation, the professional standards of a museum, and turned it around in terms of its governance, its financial footing, and in terms of the engagement that has with its local community. If we look to the educational legacy of Magna Carta, that really has been championed by Royal Holloway. So on one level, we've got the Magna Carta Doctoral School, which was funded by the Leverhulme Trust. So that's providing for a whole raft of PhD students to explore the meaning and legacy of Magna Carta in a whole range of ways through the lenses of different disciplines. There's also an ongoing series of Magna Carta lectures, public lectures exploring different facets of the Magna Carta legacy. And there is the £1 million Heritage Lottery Fund supported Citizens project. So Citizens is exploring the 800 years since Magna Carta, exploring the history of liberty, protest, rebellion and reform from Magna Carta through to the suffragettes and beyond, looking for those other Magna Carta moments, you could say, in that history where citizens' rights have been extended or defended or even been put at risk, and how people have responded to those changes and those challenges over the centuries, how the relationship between the state and the citizen has shifted and changed. And so we're exploring that through a wide range of different approaches and different projects under the umbrella of Citizens. So a big drive for this is to create a series of digital resources for schools exploring that history. So short bite-sized videos that can be dropped into lessons to make those lessons more engaging. There's a whole series of citizenship-themed workshops which the team is developing here. We've been hosting festivals of history for the local community, continuing to explore those themes associated with Magna Carta through the following centuries, and also through online courses as well. So this year, 2018, we launched a MOOC, a massive open online course in collaboration with Parliament, exploring the history of women's rights and suffrage to tie in with the centenary of Votes for Women. So a whole raft of educational activity here on campus and online.
So you painted a picture of the anniversary as maybe not providing the economic stimulus that perhaps those in power aspired for it to. Would you say that was a fair summary across the country, or is this more just a local or even regional case study?
So yes, there has been a great deal of variation across the country. So for example, if we look to Lincoln, their local authorities did report an economic impact. They reported a Magna Carta effect. millions more pounds spent in the local economy, which they attributed to those commemorative activities, events and projects which they were running. Now, there's been no such reporting of a Magna Carta economic effect here in Runnymede, either by Surrey County Council or Runnymede Borough Council. And I think that's because there was such a focus from particularly the county and the borough on that one big commemorative event. And it speaks to a tension between wanting to mark these events in the moment and still yet provide for an ongoing legacy. Now, again, that may change because recently, this summer, National Trust have been awarded their grant to improve access and interpretation at Runnymede. So as that space becomes more welcoming and accessible and interesting for visitors, perhaps down the line we will see an economic impact here locally. But for the most part, the legacy here in Runnymede has been educational in forms of the activities which are being spearheaded by the university, and also at a community level in the form of a much more resilient, engaged, outward-looking local museum.
I wonder how much the Britain's economic policy of austerity during 2010 to 2015 and beyond affected the commemorations nationally and locally.
I think certainly locally we saw the austerity politics inhibiting confidence from particularly the local authorities to fund and develop Magna Carta activities which would provide for that ongoing legacy. So, for example, if we look at the case study of the Magna Carta Visitor Centre, that was really inhibited and hemmed in by the reluctance of the local authority, Runnymede Borough Council, to put in a lot of council taxpayer money into that project, because when you're cutting core services, it's very, very difficult to justify investment in a multi-million-pound heritage centre. So yes, austerity politics certainly played a role in inhibiting the type of investment which may have led to a more sustainable legacy coming out of that Magna Carta anniversary.
And would you say there was an appetite amongst the local public to see financial investment for projects, for a raft of projects that celebrated and commemorated this, this significant moment?
I think the appetite was there, but only to an extent. Again, we have to view the commemorative activity through that lens of austerity, because that made it so difficult when core services were being cut to invest in heritage and put a particular emphasis on the councils to have to justify how that initial investment would be repaid to the local community in terms of an economic dividend, in terms of increased tourist spend and so forth. So yes, there was an appetite. I think that was evidenced by interest in the various community activities that were taking place to celebrate Magna Carta, but whether or not that was sufficient to give the council confidence to have invested more money than they did, I don't think there was investment in terms of millions of pounds worth of local taxpayer investment.
I suppose my last question to you would be that, have we arrived at a stage where Magna Carta is almost now a commercial brand in itself? It has pulling power and the potential to draw in thousands, if not maybe millions, when projects are done well. And do you think that's the right way to sort of frame anniversaries moving forward?
It's a good question. I think to answer the first part of that, yes, I think Magna Carta still does have that pulling power to draw people to Runnymede. Of course, what people then do when they come to Runnymede is an ongoing issue when you don't have a copy of the Charter locally and you have still a large open meadow to explore and to try and make sense of as a visitor. So I think certainly Runnymede will continue to hold a particular importance, both locally, regionally, nationally, internationally. It will continue to be seen as symbolic of a whole set of ideas that people do want to engage with. In terms of how that potential is realised, I think there's still a great deal of working out to be done, and in particular to ensure that if Magna Carta as a brand can draw people here to Runnymede to explore this heritage, to ensure that the benefits of that are felt in the neighbouring towns and villages. There's been an ongoing conversation about the risks of, if people do come to Runnymede, that they just go straight on to Windsor as the next tourist hotspot. And it's important to ensure that any increased tourist economic activity benefits the wider community. So it's how you join up those towns with that historic landscape, which is still to be resolved.
Okay, thank you very much.